اليتيم الذي قد مات والده إن اليتيم يتيم العلم
Assalamu
والأدب.
alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Islamic Literary Society's podcast. I'm your host, Abdul Hay. There is a broader consensus among the scholars of genocide study and all human rights organizations that what is happening in Palestine is nothing but pure genocide. And the Zionist state of Israel, and along with its Western allies, are trying their best to wipe Palestine off the map. Every part of Palestinian society, university, school, its professors, students, are being deliberately, consciously targeted. Despite all this and the huge challenge the Palestinians face, the people of Palestine continue to resist. The universities and learning center are being bombed, but the student and his lecturers, his professors, his intellectual persist in learning. They study online, sharing material via WhatsApp. Their commitment to education, learning, and self-expression is truly unshakable. Today, our discussion is based on a new publication which captures the feeling, the emotion, and the resistance of the student from Gaza. The volume entitled We Are Still Here, Anthology of Resistance and Grief and Unshattered Hope from Gaza's university student, which is co-edited by Professor Zahid, Pranjol, and Professor Jacob Norris. Professor Zahid is an Associated Dean for Education and student in the Faculty of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. He leads on all aspects of education and student experience. Professor Jacob Norris is an associated professor in Middle East history and co-director of the Middle East and North African Center. He is a global historian with a focus on Palestine, colonization, resistance, and immigration, particularly in Latin America. Welcome to the podcast and thank you both for joining us today. To start our discussion, I'd like to ask, when did you realize that this collection of poetry should be gathered, edited, and published? Could you also share what inspired that decision?
That we actually teach a lot of students in Gaza in different areas. So we started off in April 24, teaching medicine from the university, and we expanded to different subjects. And then only last year, in June, July, we started teaching English to many students in Gaza. And it's at the time when they were being heavily displaced from the north to the south of Gaza. And the timing was quite desperate. And having worked with all these students for months and weeks, and especially in the English language, realized that actually there's a lot these folks have to say, that these young students, between 18 to 22 years old, and one of them actually messaged me at the time, and they said, we lost our neighbors. They bombed the house next to us, and we are leaving our homes. And I don't know if I will come back to you, but I wanted to send you this message. And he wrote me a small paragraph, and it was so powerful. And he wrote it in English. He told me, sorry, in Arabic, and he told me, I don't have time to translate it for you because I'm literally walking. I'm on my foot. As a family, we're leaving my home, and but please, can you get the message out to the world? And I thought Instagram is a good way to do it. So we actually opened an Instagram page. But then I actually had a bit of reflection after that, that why not? Because I've seen Palestinian students read and write, and they're so powerful. Why not turn it into something more significant, sort of a book, possibly? I was never thinking about a book at that point, actually, but I was thinking maybe it could be a book or just an online journal. Then I got in touch with Jacob here. He's actually a historian in Palestine studies, so he'll know all this stuff. But yeah, he agreed. He thought this is a good idea. And that's when I knew that when you have two academics, you have the students, the desperate situation, it's all the right, elements to turn it into a book. And so, yeah, we did that. The whole idea was to get the words out, the voices out to the world, whether it's via book, Instagram, podcast, whatever it is. But luckily, we got the book And so here we are now.
Just to add to what Zahid was saying, I would say the quality of the writing for me, when Zahid came to me with this project and started to share the poems and the pieces of short prose, I was just blown away really by how eloquently the students were writing. Obviously, in a time of massive trauma, displacement, violence, and yet coming up with these very powerful words, a very kind of direct, raw fashion. So for me, it was the power of the writing. And I think the medium of poetry is particularly significant here. Sometimes in a country like the UK, I don't think we have at popular level um, the same culture of poetry. And I think in Palestine and Gaza in particular, there is a very strong culture of poetry, and young people grow up immersed in poetry. Poetry is recited in social occasions, um, an extraordinary heritage of poetry all across this wider region. And I think the students were able to draw on the power of that medium to express some very profound experiences that they were having. So for me, it was that, yeah, I was coming at this later than Zahid. Zahid had laid down a lot of the groundwork, and when he approached me with the original manuscript and the drafts of the poems, for me, it was a no-brainer because this was really, really good in terms of the quality of the writing. So we just had to get it out there and published as quickly as possible.
Just to build on what you both have shared so far, when you first read the manuscript for this collection, moving away from academia, how did it make you feel on a personal level? And was this publication a way for you to show your support for the people of Palestine?
Yeah, I think so. And we're in very close contact with the students, and Zahid in particular, who's been leading all of these amazing educational support initiatives. Convey this very strong, very powerful urge to have their words heard. And there have been times when we've been wondering, well, do the students want to, if we do events publicizing the book, to what extent are we going to have to persuade them to take part in events where they can? And they're always the response is always the same. They're always so delighted to be able to know that their words are being, in their own small way, projected to the outside world, to a wider audience. So I think that really drove certainly myself, and I'm sure Zahid as well, all the way through. And yeah, but this is at the human level, both Zahid and myself are fathers, and I think just imagining the families, their children, young people studying at university, trying to continue their education, connecting on that human level is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. It's something, I've known Palestinian people for a while. I've been kind of close to them for 13 years now. So I know their thinking, I know their dreams and their vision and how hardworking they are, and the fact that they're actually really educated people. Like when I say educated, they're all into higher education. They want to. So the desperation often, even, they didn't have food at home and there's no food outside. There's nothing they can do, right? But they tell me I would study, then look for food. Education is my main priority. And so yeah, like when you hear that, I mean, what else can you say? Yes, sure. And you do everything you can to support them in whichever way possible. And yeah, the feeling is absolutely the same as what Jacob said.
I mean, I read one particular, which we'll come to later on. That he says she had to climb on top of the roof to have access to the internet so that she can download the material. I mean, that's beyond, that's just like super student kind of thing, right? The dedication you get. One is amazed at the dedication and the seriousness the students show in toward this study. If you can tell us, how do students in Gaza keep learning and writing despite the destruction and violence around them?
Jake, do you want to go first? You want me to go first? All right. So I think um it's the daily challenges. It is the daily challenges. In fact, a lot of these authors didn't know they can write so well. But it's a desperation, the fact that they're under constant strain. and the loss and thus uncertainty and constant interruption. It's something that it kind of, despite all of this challenges, basically, they kept their sort of form of resistance that we will study, we will insist on humanity, our intellect, and their future, and but it's often very, it came to me as very ordinary, sort of grounded ways. They would write, they would continue to write, they continue to study. And the main reason is to get the words out. The main objective is to make sure that people know exactly what is happening to them, and they wouldn't give up on that. I'll give you one example if that's okay, if you have time. A student, she wrote a piece on a piece of paper and a pen she found when she left her home. She took a book and a notebook and had a page left. She took it out and she was living on the streets, kind of looking for a tent on a very sunny day in July. And she wrote this piece in Arabic. And she told me, Zahid, when I found that you want to publish this book, I actually translated it into English, but I feel like my Arabic is stronger. Then I said, okay, send it to me. And I had a Palestinian person in the UK translate it for me. And it was unbelievable. She talks about these dreams and hopes. And she said, I'll continue to dream and hope. I mean, this is not going to stop for us. This is us Palestinian people, no matter what happens. So yeah, this is another thing that actually got to me really, quite hard. Like, I need to do something for them. Yeah, Jake?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, really, the extent to which Gazans place a premium on education is so strong. And in the short-term cycle of violence and genocide and the almost total destruction of the Gaza Strip, I think international media can sometimes lose sight of that at times. But Gaza has a very long and very proud tradition of education. I'm a historian, so I'm always interested in the kind of longer, deeper histories of these processes. But Gaza has 12 accredited universities in this very, very small space, all of which have been either partially or completely destroyed during the genocide of the last 2 years. And those universities produce, leading research. They produce a population which places massive importance on education, on learning, and then taking that learning and applying it in all sorts of different ways. So I think once this genocide began to kick in, the students were just desperate to keep learning in any way they could, and to keep, not just to keep studying, but to keep writing, to keep being productive in that sense. And I think that's the thing that we're just so blown away by, and it's so inspiring to be working with these students. I feel very, very privileged. The two universities where the students who wrote this book all come from two universities, which is the Islamic University, which is Gaza's oldest university, founded in 1991, and has produced so much great scholarship writing. You'll know, your readers and listeners will know of people like Rafat al-Arair, who was tragically murdered, and his poignant poem "If I Must Die" has been reproduced around the world. He's a graduate of the Islamic University and taught at the Islamic University. People like Wa'il al-Dahdour, the Al Jazeera journalist, people like Ismail Haniyeh, all of these people came through the Islamic University, and these students are part of that tradition. And the other university where these students come from, where in fact most of the students in the book come from, is Al-Azhar University, which was opened in 1991 by Yasser Arafat, and it was Gaza's first public national university rather than being private institutions. So it's very much thought of not just as Gaza's national university, but Palestine's national university when it was opened in 1991. And the university was completely destroyed from November 2023 onwards. And the extent of the destruction, the bombing of Al-Azhar University was so great that South Africa actually included it in its case that it took to the ICJ when it first made its accusations of genocide against Israel. And that the destruction of the university is evidence, particularly of this phenomenon of scholasticide, right, which is the deliberate targeting, systemic destruction of the education system of Gaza. Not just universities, right, but schools, educational institutions, more broadly. So I think once we sort of put it in this bigger picture of an area of the world and a people who are so invested in education and have such a well-established educational system, which is then subject to total destruction, I think it helps you to understand a little bit more why these students are so intent on continuing their studies in the most difficult of circumstances.
Reading the collection, I felt that there was a desire, an excitement, and a hope on the part of the student to experience and live university life. With the ongoing genocide and violence, can you tell us how they balance their ambition with learning, with the reality of war, and how they overcome everything and use any means to continue the education?
So the universities are open, but online. So it's just the environment was very different. So the circumstances. So the online education was on. So a couple of things happened after 7th of October. The universities remained open, functional, even until now, they're functioning, but not at full capacity. So a lot of their academics were killed or were displaced, and some of them had to leave Gaza to Egypt or Turkey to save their lives and their families. Um, and what happened in the beginning, and I think it was early April, they were thinking about that now we don't have any buildings, no ceasefire. But we do need to continue the education. So they moved online, their teaching and learning in April. And that's the time when I tapped into them and said, can I help you in any way? And they said, yes, we are moving online. So please, can you give us some lectures in these modules or run these modules? Because we don't know where our lecturers are. Simply, they bombed our cloud system, storage system. So it's very difficult. And that's when they had a sort of appeal at the same time, worldwide. They need lecturers and people to volunteer to teach. So we were teaching from Sussex University officially. It was done for officially in 24. And so these students some of them were actually my medical students that I was teaching online. Some of them were in English, some of them were in engineering. So Jacob said that majority of the students are from Al-Azhar University, some of them from IUG, Islamic University of Gaza. So they kind of studied throughout. A lot of them couldn't because actually majority of them couldn't because no laptop, they lost their books and things. But they're on their phone, trying to find connection to do their exams on their phone and attend even online classes on their phones. Those who couldn't, they would watch a recorded video, for instance. So they were kind of engaged in the education, but it wasn't at full capacity, if you know what I mean. They were not getting the interaction that they should be getting. They weren't getting that experience that you would want a university student to get, in terms of employability and what do I do with my degree after when I finish my degree. For example, medical students, they didn't have anywhere to do their placements, like clinical placements, because the hospitals, they were at full capacity in taking patients, injured patients, and it got worse. So at first, they were, for example, in the hospital, they had 50 or 60 students helping in the hospital. And then after the displacement, it got so bad, they had second-year students helping in the hospital. Can you imagine a UK MBBS student doing anything in the hospital at year two? No, 20-year-old, 19 years, old. So the dedication was there. They had some opportunity to engage with their education, but there's another crisis came after, and that was paying tuition fees. People lost their income, right? They lost their savings, they lost their properties, they lost whatever they lost, everything. Didn't have enough money to enroll and study, continue to study. So then they would engage with other things, you know, uh, but they stayed in education like writing this book, getting involved in various online things to do with education, to do with reading, writing, even drawing and painting. We have some students who send their drawings and paintings to us. We will be doing some stuff in the UK, hopefully. Um, yeah, that's the level of dedication you're talking about, they continued and they still continue to study. And actually, a lot of the engineering students, they're academics who were displaced, or they have a co-supervisor from another country, Malaysia, for example. They started creating projects that can help people in real time. For example, we have a student, Saad, who is an author in this book. He finally did a project in his final year. I believe it's to refine and purify water in Gaza. So recycle water to make it drinkable. And, he was telling me about it. He said, this is something we can do right now to help our people, you know? And so there are like that the dedication remained, and they continued to do whatever they could do, whether to help the community, the neighbors, if they couldn't study, or they would do these kind of projects, or they'll read a book, write a book. It's just a constant reminder for us, that level of dedication and motivation, it's just in the center of Palestinian people, honestly. I've learned this in the last 2 years, I think, properly. And I knew about this before from others, but this time I really experienced it, you know. So yeah, that's my experience with them on that.
Just to go back to the particular piece of writing by Ala, she's a translation student. She's studying translation studies and English in particular, English Arabic translation. And that, I think that piece of writing encapsulates a lot of these themes and these trends that we're talking about. Because she describes the terrible difficulty she's had in terms of having to postpone enrollment, in terms of all of the interruptions, displacement. But it's the final stages of that piece are all about the kind of persistence, and the spirit of the Palestinian people is to never give up. I think the final words, she says, I hope we rebuild Gaza, and I hope we return to our classrooms, ready to learn, grow, and live the futures we've been fighting for. So it's kind of already thinking about the next stage, thinking about rebuilding. It's unbelievable, really.
One of the writer, Ridwan, in the collection says that the world is deaf to their pain. As editors, how does this book aim to make the world hear their pain? And what do the writers hope the reader of their work will take from it?
Yeah, there are some very strange contradictions when it comes to Palestine at the moment in terms of its the international solidarity that exists. A lot of the students who contribute to this book have sent me messages saying that they're really surprised to find somebody, a white English guy who, all of my professional life, I've been researching Palestinian history, the history of the Middle East more broadly. And they're very sort of surprised, many of them, and what motivated you to do this, and how come you're so interested in Palestine? And they say they find that very, very kind of inspiring, I guess, because they have the assumption that the world has forgotten about them, which you can completely understand from the perspective of someone in Gaza. Despite the sort of live streaming of the genocide, it seems like nobody's lifting a finger really to intervene. So from the view from Gaza is very much one of abandonment, the world forgetting. And yet in countries like the UK and all over the world, we know that there exists massive solidarity for Palestine, and in particular for what's been happening in Gaza. And everywhere we've been in terms of advertising, promoting this book, and the students who wrote it, it's a hugely positive response. There's been so much interest in the book. So sometimes you just feel this frustration that there is so much goodwill out there. There is so much solidarity. People are so much better informed in many ways, and yet it's so difficult to get that to translate into some sort of meaningful change on the ground for students in Gaza. And I think the way that Zahid has gone about the educational support programs is a great example of how to do that at ground level already, because that's making real differences to students who are desperately trying to continue their studies on an everyday basis.
Do you think students feel a need to show to the world that they exist, that they are human just like everyone else? Do they need to say, we are like you, we feel pain too? Do poetry, short stories become a way for them to connect with the rest of the world? And in your view, are they writing to be understood, or simply writing out of pain?
Bit of both, actually. Some students should write out of pain. They're suffering, they have to document it somehow. And the others would really want their purposes. People need to know that we are still here. And that's the name of the book, actually. That came from that sort of the feeling that, we are still here. Like, how come people are not still doing anything for us, to save us, to protect us? We have our dreams. We want to finish our education. I have my young children. They need to grow up. Because a lot of these authors actually have young kids in Gaza. And when I speak to them, it's the same thing. People need to know we are here. And they're frustrated. How come no one's doing anything about us? So then, for example, Wissam, she wrote specifically to ensure that people read her writing. And there are some other authors in the book. It's a bit of both.
No, I absolutely agree with Zahid. There's over 50 students who have contributed to this book. And Gazans are human beings, and they're in all of their variety, right? So the people process and experience these things in their own ways. And some students are processing pain, and they do that from a kind of personal necessity, and others are very much aware that they're trying to engage an international audience. So it's very much a mixture, I would say. I think the power of this book lies in the fact that it's capturing those relatively ordinary student experiences. Because a lot, as we've been saying, Gaza and Palestine more generally produces copious amounts of amazing writing, some of which gets published and translated and makes its way to countries like the UK. Much of it doesn't. I think where this book really stands out is the fact that these are not recognized professional published authors up to this point. I think some of them will have careers as writers, and we're already seeing ways in which that's transpiring. But in general, they're just students writing from this sort of very urgent place of living through terrible violence, displacement, famine, etc. And I think that's what really makes the book stand out. The readers are getting more that sense of just straight from the heart, straight from this very kind of raw place of writing, of students who, in many ways, share the same kind of hopes and dreams as students all over the world.
There is a story by an author named Huda in which she describes a bag of flowers stained with blood. Can you recall your conversation with her and others who have gone through a similar experience? How do they find energy and courage to pick up a pen and write their story in a time like this, despite witnessing murder, blood, and death all around them? What gives them that strength, the power in that very moment?
Well, let me give you a story, a very short story, okay? And it will tell you exactly what. So I had a student, he messaged me and he said, because I was in constant, contact with so many of them, so many students, and said, Zahid, we don't have any food, so I'm going to get some flour with my neighbors, my friends, two of my friends. And hopefully I'll be back in the evening. And once I'm back in the evening, I will send you the writing in English and Arabic. I said, okay, that's fine. Just be careful, because we are watching the news. We are seeing on social media what's happening in Gaza. So he goes for 3 days, nothing. I message him, no response. It's not even going. It's a single tick. And I don't know this is a scary moment for me because I don't know what's happened to him. He comes back after 3 days. And his sister is actually also a student in our group, in one of the teachings that I do. And she messaged me. She said, my brother is back, but he hasn't eaten anything for 3 days, and he'll respond to you as soon as he wakes up. Please bear with us. As if I feel like I'm putting pressure on them. It's just I'm worried. So he wakes up, he messages me. He said, so sorry I'm late. I wanted to send it to you 2 days ago, but the two friends I went with, they're both killed. I was in the middle. Three of us, they shot us and I was lucky that, and we three of us fell down. Everybody, dropped on the ground to hide, to cover themselves. And he has said that those two friends, my childhood best friends, were killed. And then I asked, are you okay? Are you injured? Because if you're injured, you need to stay at home and relax. He said, no, I'm fine. And I did get a flour bag, 25 kg. The only issue was carrying it without any food and water for so many days from the aid center to my home. It's a long walk, and I had to sleep on the way to get to my home. And my sister has prepared bread, fresh bread. After a long time, we're having bread. So it's a bit of a mixture of, sadness of losing their childhood friends and happiness that they're able to eat some um, freshly baked bread after so many weeks. And that mixed emotions. And I didn't know if I should be happy for him that, hey, you managed to make it home and now you should enjoy yourself. Or should I send him condolences for losing his best childhood friends? And he told me that those two guys were the only young men of their families. And he doesn't know what will happen to the young sisters and the mother they have. The fathers that were killed already. So he told me I'll have to support them somehow. And then I told him, are you still okay to send me the writing? Because you don't have to if you can't. That's okay. We can wait. And he told me, no, no, I'll send it to you by tomorrow. I promise. And he did send it to me. And to be honest, I forgot his name. He's one of the authors. Um, so that's the kind of I was scared. I didn't want to lose anyone. I mean, I lost some students, but not from this book, from other courses that I run. But yeah. That's I hope you can feel what I'm feeling or
Yeah,
felt. Yeah, yeah.
you answered perhaps the next question. How do you feel when you know some of the students, the writers of the book, perhaps not make it and not see the end product? It's difficult to handle. I suppose I want to kind of talk about this, moving away from the book. How do you deal with it? Are you as a writer being editors being fathers and, having you talk about bread. I mean, we can just go to our kitchen and get whatever we want. How do you process this in real time?
I have to say there have been lots of moments where I've had to say to Zahid, just try to look after yourself as well, because in order to be there for the students, Zahid does so much, not just in terms of the book, but the wider project. He seems to be up 24 hours a day, constantly in contact with the students, trying to help, trying to provide support. There've been lots of times where I've just broken down and I've said to Zahid, I've just got to check out for a little bit because it can be very, very difficult, very powerful, and it's a good question to ask. You have conversations, we speak sometimes on the phone, exchange messages, we do events with these students, and in lots of ways we have common experiences. I'm really into football and I talk about football with some of these students. They have a great sense of humor. You can be talking about music that you both like, and then so you sort of connect in this way where as we've been emphasizing, on a very human level, which we all can share. And then something happens, or you hear about something that's happened to these students, and you realize they're living in a very, very different world to the very privileged world that we inhabit, and it can blow you away. So I think I don't have I don't have an easy answer to that question. It's sometimes I just have to sort of, yeah, it can be very overwhelming sometimes. Yeah.
Sorry,
Go
go on.
go on, go
I
on.
wanted to add something to it actually. Something that we missed talking about is the book. The reason why we've pushed hard to get this book out as fast as possible is because of the same worry that some of these authors might not see the end product, right?
That's hard.
And it's very hard. I mean, those few weeks, I have to say, I was up, yes, it's true, 24/7, getting the editing done. And I had some good people on my side who actually helped me with the Arabic language, for example, and the translation to make sure it's correct. Because we couldn't reach out to the students when I had to do some proofreading. They were like, they're gone for a few days, no internet connection. But I would find out because I have people in Gaza, they'll call them and say, hey, are you okay? Zahid is looking for you. And say, oh, you just tell him we don't have connection. Um, the constant, there was a constant worry, that something may happen. But something you have to remember, Gazans are not, these authors, the students are not poor. They're rich people. They're wealthy, obviously pre-war. They're living a normal life. I can give you an example. The tuition fees to study medicine in Gaza is 29,000 Jordanian dinar, which is about 40,000 pounds over 7 years. So it's and they were fine. They could afford it. Now it's a different situation, obviously. Um, they had villas. They still live in villas. They still live in modern houses and kitchens and flats and apartments and buildings and things. All were destroyed, majority of them. So they had a good life. They know what it's like, right? But there's one thing that they didn't complain once. They always said in Arabic, Alhamdulillah, that we are the most important thing is we are alive. I have my mom, I have my father, my siblings. We are okay. Yes, we don't have anything to eat, but Alhamdulillah, we are okay. But yeah, this is the
There is
yeah.
now that you mentioned in terms of the Hamd and the religious connotation. I mean, they're very religious people, whatever way you want to look at it. And there's always appreciation for life and the little that they have. I mean, I read a number of report where the journalists go and they visit the people in tent and they have nothing and then they share the little they have. So there is a kind of religious consciousness that goes within that society, and especially when difficulty that they're expressing, you generally expect people to go the other way, but they tend to reawaken their religious feeling and incline toward it. I mean, the news, as we all can perhaps agree, the Western media hasn't done a very good job from the beginning even till now with the so-called ceasefire. I mean, I just read it today. The Israeli did a few attack on Gaza throughout and injured about 13 people, I think. So the ceasefire is it's just a name, So but they're usually numbers. So 15 people die, and just kind of numbers, and you can't relate to it. Uh, how do you then put name to those students throughout the work?
Yeah, I think above all by publishing the book and by allowing the students to speak and have that voice, we're always very clear that we're just our role as editors is just bringing this together and trying to give it a platform. The students are all um, have their names there in the book. The book is being translated into many different languages. Arabic, the Arabic version, much of this obviously was originally written in Arabic. That's coming out very soon with a publisher called Al Mutawassat, which has its offices in Lebanon and in Italy, Palestinians who founded that publishing house. We have versions coming out into French and German, in Spanish. So it's just the international reach of the book, above all, is giving those students a voice, I think.
Zahid?
Zahid, do you want to come in?
No, I think that that's it. We treat individual authors there as an entity. If you think about it, they are full of life. They're just like humans, just like us, humans just like us. They're individual person with dreams and everything that you can possibly imagine as a father, as a brother. And I think we um you're right about the ceasefire, absolutely. Absolutely. But what's very important to me is mentioning what Jacob said is that the book belongs to them. It's for the Palestinians by the Palestinians. And that gives them that platform. That gives them that the authority to say, this is our book. So last week in Gaza, they did a book launch for the first time in a safe zone in a building. I joined online for some time. They had some guests, and some of our authors were there. And lots of feedback came to me after, and they said this is the best thing they had done the last 2 years.
Wow.
Because after that, they had a workshop for children. So again, under this We Are Still Here project, we actually run a art therapy type thing for children under age 10. And we had 40 children attending, painting and drawing and engaging with these authors. I mean, the whole atmosphere, and they told me some of these kids actually didn't laugh. didn't play, didn't have this a normal childhood for the last 2 years, and this gave them that opportunity, and they're asking me to do it again. They said, please, can we do it again? So they will organize. But so I would always tell them, yes, of course you do it again. You don't need my permission to do it. It's for you, it's for Palestinians, by Palestinians, and so encouraging them to take ownership, to take some leadership, to get things done, it's for me, it's very important that they're in charge of this and they take ownership of this throughout. And that's what they're doing. And that's what's giving them that authority, that name to the number, that, you understand that concept of I'm not just a number, I'm a human being. I have, as a Palestinian in my own land, I want to be able to do things. And this is kind of giving them that opportunity in this dire situation. Again, the credit goes to them, of course, not us. So Jacob and I, we from the very outset, we told each other that, you know what, we are just putting this together as a book. That's it.
Now the book has been published. I'm sure you like you mentioned you had a book launch. Firstly, in a deeper conversation, what are they? Had they made any change in their life, at least emotionally? And what conversation do you had, or feedback rather, you had from readers and those who engage with the book? And what kind of conversation do you wish to have in the future?
Yeah, so we're doing a range of events. Zahid has just described that amazing event that took place in Gaza itself the other day. I think for me personally, the main source of hope in a way for the future is the next generation. And as people who work in universities, I've been working at Sussex University since 2013, and since that time I've been teaching modules specifically on Palestinian history. I work on mostly pre-Nakba Palestinian history. I do a course that goes up to the Nakba, and each year you get a new group of students come in who've chosen to take that course. I remember when I started to teach that course at Sussex, I was not quite sure what the kind of political climate would be, if there might be some difficult conversations. Would there be sort of students with Zionist sympathies in that class? How would that play out? How do you manage that as a teacher? And I had various strategies, I suppose, to deal with that. But these days, I just don't. The only question really is, are the students going to be really switched on and really active, or are they going to be kind of passively supportive of Palestine? Now, as we said earlier, that doesn't necessarily, sadly, at the moment, translate into tangible results at the kind of level of geopolitics. But when you look at the younger generation in universities, not just in the UK, all over the world, there is a huge sea change is occurring in terms of people's perceptions of Palestine. So the events we've done at the university, various places connected to the university, have been really positive in that sense. We're holding an exhibition in our university library, and the theme of the exhibition is scholasticide. And I think at the start of the genocide, it would have been probably very difficult to hold an exhibition of that type, mentioning words like genocide, mentioning words like scholasticide, foregrounding Gazans at the center of that picture without having to also show, quote unquote, the other side. And I think what I'm struck by now is how the university library team is actually completely okay with it. And we're going to have, the plan is to have a sort of an installation of a tent inside this library exhibition space where people can walk into the tent and actually watch students from the book. They've created short videos of themselves reading out extracts of their poetry from the book. And so the students at Sussex, and hopefully we can replicate this elsewhere, will in a very, very sort of small way get a sense of these enormous challenges that the students in Gaza are facing, and that they're ongoing challenges, because you're quite right to point out the ceasefire is a total farce. Hundreds have been killed, obviously, as we know since then. The majority of Gazans living in tents or temporary accommodation. Another storm is coming in tonight, apparently, and these very makeshift accommodation, which is often destroyed in the cold winter storms. It's a hugely difficult ongoing situation, and then this farce of a board of peace that's been announced recently. This isn't something that finished in the October's so-called ceasefire. It's an ongoing, desperate situation.
The question was interesting. How did it contribute to, their lives changes and stuff? That boosts confidence in a lot of our students. So I'll give you some examples. One of them was offered to write an article after publishing this book for Al Jazeera Arabic. The other one was there's another student who I think in Canada they did they featured her because of her writing. Another student's writing was featured by a very famous priest, I think in France, I'm not sure, as a Christmas message, but highlighting the Palestinian people in the center. There were numerous other students who come and message me to say, I just didn't know that I can write. And you've changed my life, and all those nice things. And I can read them out to you. I've got them on WhatsApp, but the whole idea is that it opened doors to a lot of students, and I hope that it will continue to do that going forward. And that's the idea, it's not just, hey, you publish a book today, tomorrow you forget about it. Actually, how can we take it from this stage to something else?
We have reached end of our discussion. I'd like to sincerely thank you both for your time and for sharing this important work with us. I also like to thank our audience for joining the conversation. I strongly encourage everyone to get hold of the book. Again, the book is called We Are Still Here, an anthology of resistant grief and unshuttered hope from Gaza's university student. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.
اليتيم الذي قد مات والده إن اليتيم يتيم العلم والأدب